How to Cure Imposter Syndrome, a realistic guide to curing self-inadequacy. Self-inadequacy, which can manifest as low self-confidence, feelings of inferiority, feeling small, or imposter syndrome, is a dynamic whose current popular treatment, basically denial, is itself rather inadequate. As a therapist, I'd say about 10% of clients who seek my services bring self-inadequacy as a central complaint, usually in the form of low self-confidence or feeling not enough. However, other clients may also have this complaint sometimes, even though other issues may be for them more central. The popular approach to these feelings, basically the Stuart Smalley approach, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
Because I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
Is never really effective because it does not get at the realistic concerns embedded in the symptom of self-inadequacy. So the first thing to do with self-inadequacy is to accept that the feeling is there. Now, that does not mean accepting the validity of the story it might tell. I'm good for nothing, I'll never succeed. But rather, it means accepting that for whatever reason, for the time being, the feeling of inferiority itself is there. So self-inadequacy is a disorder of the competence function. And the competence function is actually a very tender function of the psyche. This function is the realm of the instincts and the emotions, the realm of the competitive spirit, and the thrust for victory. Now, self-inadequacy may hurt. It may involve feeling weak and small, perhaps shameful even, but denying it only causes it to go underground and makes it impossible to address and to heal. Competence for a human is not a given. In fact, to achieve competence, we have to move through incompetence. If you are listening to this, you probably learned to stand and to walk at some point in your early life. But before you learned to stand and to walk, you inevitably took falls. You were an incompetent stander before you were a competent stander. You were an incompetent walker before you became a competent walker. However, as a small child, you were unconcerned about this state of affairs. You accepted it because you didn't yet have the brain power to be concerned about it. And you worked for your competence in the realm of standing and then walking because standing and walking were of interest to you. Now, things can get more complicated as we get older, but there are certain basic principles that remain. So the first step to curing self-inadequacy is to accept your imperfection and allow for others' acceptance of your imperfection. Okay, our imperfection is neither good nor bad. It is simply the reality of our situation. Now, the second step, however, is in the context of this acceptance to take responsibility for the development of competencies and worth in whatever are the relevant areas of your life. Okay, now, take responsibility here is not meant to invoke shame. We could just as well substitute the phrase appreciate your power to for take responsibility for. Okay, responsibility is about making contact with and actualizing your power. Okay, indeed, it becomes difficult or impossible to make contact with and actualize your power in a context of toxic shame. So, again, it's not one but two steps for curing self-inadequacy. The acceptance of your imperfection is number one. Then number two is taking responsibility for the development of competencies and worth. Does that make sense? Now, if you ever suffer from feelings of self-inadequacy, one way to massage and stimulate the competency function would be to say the following incomplete sentences out loud without completing them once a day for 5 to 10 days. You just go through the motions of saying the words that I'm about to give you once a day for 5 to 10 days and see if you don't find yourself feeling over the course of those days just a little bit more internally aligned. Okay, here are those incomplete sentences. if I can accept feelings of self-inadequacy, if I can accept my imperfection, if others can accept my imperfection, if I can take responsibility for developing competencies, if I can take responsibility for developing social worth, and finally, I am becoming aware. One note, those who come to therapy with self-inadequacy as a central concern are generally those for whom the competency function is an especially large function in their psyche. This is following what I call the Wizard of Oz principle, whereby our greatest strength tends to be at the root of our greatest weakness. But anytime self-inadequacy is a concern, it is also a wonderful opportunity to enliven the competency function. And as we do this, our lives become more open, more vibrant, and more free.